My life, episode 3. In the first 2 episodes, I wanted to share some of my earliest memories from my very first apartment that I shared with my parents and with my sister, as that was one of the most memorable, things in my life. We realize now that the first years of your life define you as a person so much that they really create your future self. Then later on in your life, everything that you do kind of stems from these first years. So I'm happy that I have had these beautiful memories in my first apartment, of which I shared a few. The one was I, Tarzan, and the other one was the man with the horse leg. There were others, of course, playing chess and cooking. Cooking was such an amazing thing because we lived in that one room, so whatever we cooked that day, we all smelled like that. All our clothes smelled like that. And that created that kind of cohesion, that unity. You realize that truly our family was never happier than we were in that one room where we shared everything, with the good and the bad and the ugly. I mean, my parents kind of had to find a way to be, let's say, active with each other with 2 kids around. It was a challenge for sure, but they still managed to do it, and that's the beautiful part of it. I mean, I have witnessed some things that I shouldn't have as a child, obviously. But even those are part of, you growing up as a person and realizing that this is the reality of life. We were really lucky to live there, and it took us such a long time, for all of us to get that brand new apartment. But one of the memories that I still want to share, before joining my elementary school at the age of 6 and 7, which kind of coincided with us moving from this one room to a brand new apartment. So the same year we moved to a new apartment, I started the elementary school. But prior to starting the elementary school, because both of my parents actually worked, they had full-time jobs, and most of the time they worked in the first shift, which was great. Like, it was morning from 7 a.m. until 3 p.m. They would go early in the morning to work, and they would drop us off or drop me off in the kindergarten, and then pick me up in the afternoon. Sometimes my late grandmother, that supported us with our TV and some other things, would also take care of me, and that was kind of an interesting thing. I remember at some point my grandmother shared her job with another female because she was not able to do a full-time job, and the other person was the same. So they both kind of shared one job. So they did like one shift in half, and that was also another lovely thing that they did. Like, this is something that they call part-time work here in the Western world, but they basically shared one job. So they only worked 4 hours a day, in order to have the rest of the time for the family or something like that. And that was also a really, really cool thing. So sometimes, my grandmother would take care of me, but most of the time I would be in this family. I would be in the kindergarten, I'm sorry. The kindergarten was such an amazing experience. I was always Mr. Know-It-All. Since, my parents were kind of involved into my upbringing, they used to read books to me and shared stories. So I was kind of exposed to all these, tales before I would actually listen to them in the kindergarten, which was maybe not the best thing. Because, during the reading time from 12 to 1, they would read like something about Cinderella or Snow White, and I would be like, I know what happened. I would not be able to keep quiet because I would constantly interrupt the teacher to tell about, and then what happened, and then this happened, and then that happened. So that they actually resorted to putting a scotch tape on my mouth during the reading. I mean, talk about the educational tool. using a scotch tape and taping your taping the child's mouth so they don't speak. I guess that was totally understandable and normal at that time when I was a child. This is like 1980, 1981. I don't think that would fly anymore, but I'm sure that many, many teachers, thought about it. I have spent about 20 years in education as a teacher, as a professor, and believe me, I've seen it all. I have never used the scotch tape though on my students, but again, a lot of times I thought to myself, my God, what will it take for them, to kind of be quiet? Because you always have children that are really outspoken, then you have children that are really shy. So you're trying to find a balance and to make sure everybody gets a chance to speak, which is not always easy, Again, it goes to show how important is the first few years of your life. In the attachment theory, they say that your attachment style is formed around 2 years old, So whether you have a secure and insecure or avoidant attachment style with your relationship, it depends on everything that happened with your mother, with your own upbringing. So if your mother was there all the time, then you will develop one style. If she was not there all the time, if she was selective, it's very important to understand that it's our parents and we in general do not have that proper education, and we did not have that for sure. When people get married, and I spoke about this in my newfound reality videos, in the need for the more proactive approach towards families. Parents are left on their own, and people are left on their own, to their own devices. When you get married, the church and the government will give you a paper saying you're married, and then you go on your own way. Nobody's really there to support you along the way, to tell you this is what's going to happen when you date with each other. This is what's going to happen when you have a child. This is what you need to know in the first year, in the second year. I mean, these days we have that information available online, but even that, it's very, very important, to have, the government mandate counseling and to mandate, this external help in which we would be provided necessary tools to maintain our own mental health, our relationships, and our offsprings. We really need that education. It's very, very important. And why this is important? Because of this particular episode that I'm sharing today, and this is about my very first sexual experience, which happened to me when I was 5-6 years old. Usually after this reading time in the kindergarten, we would have a mandatory and obligatory an hour of sleeping before our parents would come pick us up, an hour and a half. So after we would finish the lunch, we would listen to a story and then go to bed. And of course we were put next to each other because there was a lot of kids. A lot of times there would be a boy next to you or a girl next to you. It didn't matter, we were all children. However, one particular afternoon, my bedmate, bunkmate, whatever, was a little girl, of my age, and she asked me, may I play with you? May I, put my hand onto your body and in your underwear? I was surprised, of course, because as a child I knew that that's not something that we really do with each other. But I also didn't find it, sufficient enough to say no. I just kind of felt like, yeah, sure, why not? Go away. So she did it, and it was amazingly pleasurable. I have to tell you, I had some sort of an orgasm without an actual orgasm. I was a child, of course, and we are not really ready to have these conversations about children's sexuality, but it happens more often than we think. And of course, after she explored my body, I felt I needed to reciprocate because I'm a good person, The nature of my relationships, I think, was built then and there, because I always made sure that my partner was as satisfied as I was. So I said, may I do the same to you? And of course, she wanted that. And as I was exploring her body, this is dangerous. We're gonna get in trouble for talking about this. Again, this is just a story I'm sharing, and you may run with it or you may not. And as I was exploring her body, the teacher saw a commotion. And there's these kids, the blanket is moving and all that stuff. She came up to us, we didn't see her, and just uncovered us, took the blanket off. And of course, she saw my hand at my friend's body. She didn't see the first part, and she proceeds to grab this cloth hanger and beat the crap out of me. She hit me several times on my thigh and left imprints. She just lost it. Called me a pervert and all these things. I was like, man, I'm never having sex again, or whatever this is, this is not leading me to any good situation. Again, I was about 5-6 years old, I really had no idea why this girl approached me with such a suggestion, because at that time I really was never really, I might have been interested as a child to know what the difference between the boy or the girl was, but I never really did anything about it. In my opinion, this girl was probably traumatized in her own childhood. Later on, I met her several times after, moving back home for a visit. She became a tomboy. She was very manly, but I always found her attractive, which speaks about my own sexuality and the fluidity of it. Because I saw that feminine in you, even though outwardly she turned out to be such a tomboy. She used to dress as a man. I have no idea where she is now, but to me she was always that girl, rather than what she turned out to be. And obviously, because the way she turned out, she probably have had these early sexual experiences with God knows whom, what, when. I always asked myself later on whether she actually did this with other boys or girls in this kindergarten, or maybe I was the first one, or maybe she felt for some reason safe and comfortable to ask me these things, because at no point I was asked by another girl to play with me. That was the only time, really, which ended up with me being beaten badly and bruised. So both my ego and my body were really bruised. My father came to pick me up that afternoon, and he immediately saw that there was something wrong with me. So I showed him the bruises on my leg, my body. So he went up to the kindergarten teacher and slapped her. Needless to say, we were both expelled from that kindergarten. Him as a violent man and me as a pervert at the young age of 6. And that entered my file. So later on, when I started school, and they were still there, like, oh, this is the guy with the questionable reputation. Definitely wasn't our proudest moment. None of us really reacted the best possible way. But to this day, I asked myself why. How did this come about? How come we didn't know how to talk about it in a more constructive way? This could have been a learning moment. Instead, became a traumatic experience for everybody involved. Again, I've spent about 20 years in education. I've seen it all, and I never proceeded to physically punish, my students, even though I worked with kids and adults, and I've seen it all. and I've seen all kinds of things, and I would always address these issues in the least possible intrusive way, to inform them that this is something that we shouldn't be doing, or that it might be inappropriate, it might feel us or others, uncomfortable, and in case of children, I would not be able to do this on my own. So a lot of times I would consult my co-workers in order to deal this in a kind of manner that is more fitting of a child and their understanding. So this is something that I've talked about, in my Newfound Reality podcast. The reality is that we don't really want to address these issues, not just sexuality, but also the sexuality in children. I mean, last person who really tried to do that was Freud, and to this day we kind of we are iffy to talk about these things. But the reality is, was in my experience, that children can be sexualized, and they do have a lot of questions that we kind of leave until they are 16 or 18. So we don't talk about our children about the sexual education until they are, like, again, 16 or 18. In schools they learn how to put on a condom on a banana. That's it. That's it. While they are exposed to absolutely everything online. Children can find out about any form of sexuality, any form of degradation, humiliation, position, and things that you don't even know about before they even actually fall in love with their first person. So in many cases, a lot of children engage in sexual activities from an early age. Again, throughout my videos I will share some of the things that happened to me. I was more active before 18 than after 18 sexually. I mean, I started when I was 6, obviously. But no one was there to talk about it. I mean, I couldn't go up to my parents or to my teachers and say, well, really, what should we do? Because nobody wants to talk about it. So kids are left on their own to figure out what to do about it. And now we have, especially this day and age, we have children engaging in these sexual acts without actually knowing what love is. No child is writing poetry to each other anymore. You're not going to write a poem to a girl just to hold her hand.
Lee Doyle and Glenda Parity, please call extension 6502.
And maybe
Lee Doyle and Glenda
go out,
6502.
for an ice cream, or sit in the park, maybe kiss and hug. I mean, like, we really have a skewed view of sexuality, and I really think that these things should be addressed in a more coherent way, and we are doing that, but everybody's up in arms about it. So while we don't even want to talk about it, you can see the reality that our leaders around the world are engaging in much worse activities with both children and adults, yet we don't even talk about it. So which is why I decided to share my own first experience, which was traumatic, of course, but it taught me a valuable lesson. So that's how I ingloriously or infamously, whatever the word is, ended up my kindergarten. And then I waited to start my elementary school at the age of 7. So somehow me starting the elementary school and us moving to a new apartment coincides. So when I was 7 years old, I was in the new school and the new apartment, and I will start my next video with that. Finally took my father, so many points that he got from his education, from his job, from my mother's job, from having one child, and then the second child. We collected enough points so that our government and our workers' union ended up assigning us an apartment free of charge, and we happily moved from our one room, from Tarzans and men with horses' legs to a beautiful 2-bedroom apartment. Even though that apartment was not that far from our home, I still remember that walk, and to me it seemed like it was at the end of the world. You know, back as a child, everything seemed so big, and the distances were like huge and enormous. You know. So I remember us walking into that apartment, you know, for the first time. My father got the keys and we went there, and when we showed up to this brand new empty apartment, we opened the door, and the rest is history, to be continued in the next video. Love you all, and please listen to my videos with a grain of salt and use your own judgment. Love you all. Cheers. Bye.